Hey YouTube, welcome to my neutral card review. We've been doing these a little bit on stream. Every day we'll spend like an hour-ish just talking about the new stuff that was revealed. Not really something I can upload to YouTube. Most of it's just talking with chat rather than talking about cards in particular, and it wouldn't be very good content on YouTube. But anyway, this is going to be hopefully a short-ish 10-minute video where we talk about all of the neutral cards from Master Mirror. And first off, we have Squirrel, who is a neutral version of Nilfgaard's Dythwyn Arbalist? Something Arbalist, which is just the card that on the melee row, you play it, banish a card from your opponent's graveyard, and if you play it on the ranged row, you banish a card from your own graveyard. This can't banish cards from your own graveyard, but really you're almost always playing it to banish something from the opponent's graveyard, aside from like Experimental Remedy and some stuff that doesn't see play at all, like Blue Dream. Not a lot of things that you care about banishing from your own graveyard. Notably in the set, every faction is getting a Echo card, which Squirrel can banish from the graveyard. So you can deny the second use out of your opponent's Aneromancy or any of the faction Echoes. So overall, I think Squirrel is going to have a lot more matchups where it's not just a 4-point card than Arbalist currently does. Right now, if your opponent's not on Double Ball or playing some kind of Crow Mother or Flying Redinian deck, you're not getting much in the way of targets from your Arbalist. But with this expansion bringing a new graveyard interaction to every faction, I would not be surprised if we start seeing Squirrel in more factions. Now, the downside of this is that it's a low tempo play. So if you and your opponent are fighting over a round and you play Squirrel, you just played a 4-point card into a round that theoretically matters. So even if you get rid of their Echo card, they're probably winning the round for it. It is best, it's just like Arbalist, it's best when your opponent dry passes, so you get to banish their Crow Mother, you get to banish their Vote. Yeah, I think this card's alright. As far as playability goes, I'd give it like a 3-ish out of 5. I'm sure some singleton decks are going to try to find room for this in all the factions, but aside from that, not totally sure how much we're going to see of Squirrel. Next up, we have Fortune Teller, who deploy melee, give Doomed to a unit, and deploy ranged, I believe. I think there's a typo in this graphic. Give Veil to a unit. Now, unlike Squirrel, this does two different things. Where Squirrel is just caring about the opponent's graveyard interaction, this can deal with the opponent's graveyard stuff, and it can protect you from like poisons, or maybe in some weird situations protect you from locks. But currently, this is probably the best answer in the game to getting poisoned. Where when you purify poison, your opponent can still later on use 2 poisons on that unit that you purified. The Veil not only stops the poison that they currently have on your unit, but now the unit that they're trying to poison can't be poisoned further unless they purify the Veil off themselves. And by purifying the Veil off, they're purifying their initial poison. So to poison the unit that you give Veil to, so you stop their first poison, and then if they want to poison it later, they have to purify the Veil and then apply 2 more poisons. So basically, realistically, this means your opponent can't poison the thing that they initially try to poison if you play Fortune Teller. And then it still does the stuff like answering Crow Mother, it answers Flying Redinian. You can't play it on dry passes like you can with Squirrel, and it doesn't answer Echo cards. But I think the versatility is going to see this card slotted in a few more decks as long as Poison is still a mechanic that people are still playing around with in the competitive landscape. Next up, we have Pact, which is basically just a 4-provision Swallow Potion. There's a couple of fringe benefits of giving something doomed, stuff like Sirenova, potentially, where you use packs to keep things out of your graveyard, so your Sirenova keeps coming back. Some of the doomed synergy stuff that we see in the set, maybe there's going to be reasons to want to give your own units doomed, but I think with the way this card is priced at 4 provisions, the doomed is supposed to be more of a downside than an upside. Now, I've played enough bad battle preps in Vigo decks to know that I will certainly be including this in some decks where I just need more 4-provision filler in my special cards. Potentially, like Scoia'tael Gourd might want this in place of potentially like Temperings or some of the other bad 4P cards, or the worst special cards they play in the deck, just to fill out space and free up some provisions. Yeah, it's not super exciting. I think it's like a 2.5 or 3 out of 5, but it fills a role, and it fills that role pretty effectively. Willow the Wisp. Destroy a doomed unit. So this is pretty mid-game dependent. I feel like if there are multiple decks going around that are putting like Savolas Frighteners in play, maybe this becomes something you might want to tech in your deck alongside with a couple of Fortune Tellers so it's not bricked. But really, this sort of just feels like Poison with extra steps, where you apply Doomed to something, and then you can Will-O-the-Wisp it. But sometimes your opponent's units just like apply the first instance of poison to themselves because they come out doomed. I'm not seeing this card being great, but I mean, I can imagine a meta where people might want to tech this into their decks. Next up, we have Offering. Damage a unit by 1 death blow. Play a bronze unit from your graveyard and give it Doomed. There are 2 main places that I could see playing this in. The first is with Spies. Nilfgaard is getting a bunch of new spy support with this expansion. Offering lets you kill a spy and then resurrect one of your engines, such as the new Seditious Aristocrats, or maybe an Impera Enforcers, or maybe even you're doing like Thirsty Dame things and you can resurrect your Thirsty Dame. By putting a bunch of 1s in play on your opponent's side of the board, you'll always have a target for Offering. And if the deck's in the market for replaying its bronze engines a couple of times, I could definitely see potentially running an Offering or 2 in the deck. The other use is with Gurney. There are already some Gurney lists running around playing Necromancy for Endrega Larva, and since that's something that you want to be doing early in the round anyway, you can always just, instead of spending the extra provision on Offerings, or on a Necromancy, you can instead trim down, play an Offering, and early on in the round, use Offering on your Gurney fruit? Yizgith fruit? Whatever it's called. Gurney's fruit. It'll always be a 1, you can get it next turn, you don't actually lose any points by deathblowing your own unit, and you're basically just playing a 6 provision Necromancy. And yeah, if that's something that you're trying to do, could be good. In matchups where you expect your opponent to give you a 1-point target, you can hold on to this and maybe resurrect a Noon Wraith later on in the round, and get to play this as a 7 instead of just an Endrega Larva, though I feel like a lot of the time you're just gonna want to res your Endrega Larvas with it. Yeah, potentially copies 4 through 5 of Larva if you really want to go down that route and play a lot of Larvas. Yeah, I could see it being played. Wouldn't be too surprised if those particular decks played it. I don't think we'll see it outside of like the decks that naturally can line it up very easily, but we'll see. We'll see. 6-speed Necromancy is definitely something. Next, we have Marlene de Trois. Veil, Order, Give Veil. So the easiest card to compare this to would be Lady of the Lake, but I think Veil is significantly better at protecting engines than Shield is. With Veil, you protect from locks. Notably, you can give Veil to something the same turn that you're playing it, unlike with Fortune Teller. So this is very good at protecting its locks. It can protect against poisons, which is currently about a third to half of the removal being played on ladder right now. There's a lot of poison running around. I suspect that won't be the case after this expansion with all the cards that have Veil, but who knows. And yeah, some other statuses, like it prevents bleed from going on things. Against like vampires, if you're in that matchup, you can spend the first few turns of a round going like sort of like pseudo unitless by making it so your opponent can't bleed any of your things. Like you lead on a Marlene, you play another Veil unit, then you play something else, have Marlene give Veil to it, and you can make their leader really awkward. Overall, I think the big issue is that there's not a home for it. Maybe there's some kind of engine deck and there's some locks running around, then you might want to include this. But as far as I can tell, there's nothing that obviously wants this. I would give this like a solid 2 out of 5 in playability. I've been not giving star ratings to everything, but I'm going to give this one a 2. Next up, we have Siegfried of Denzel. Deploy, purify all units. So here we have support for Beast SK and Morntart monsters. Yeah, and it's also it's a tech card for stuff like vampires and potentially spies. A 5 for 7 is a little hard to justify as a tech card. It's a little narrow too, but if we're seeing a lot of spies on ladder, we're seeing a lot of vampires on ladder, maybe. The really exciting use for this is obviously making big Morntarts, making big Corrupted Flaminikas, not needing to play terrible cards like Spring Equinox in order to fill up your graveyard for those. The Zero Tempo play made a lot of that more of a meme than it needed to be. While with Morntart, you still have to worry about like playing Petri's Filter, having Petri's Filter sticking. I think for Corrupted Flaminica in particular, this might make those kinds of decks a little bit more playable. You have Chrome Mother that makes 2 Doomed Beasts immediately. You have Rhizome that can make 3. So you can get an extra 5-ish points in a Corrupted Flaminica pretty easily, while also like purifying any poisons that your opponent happens to put on your board before you play this down. Notably, this becomes a tech card for vampires. It feels like maybe there might be some play there too, if they know you have it. Instead of just like committing all of their leader charges in Oriana, it once, they can try to split the leader charges a bit more like you would currently to play around something like the Syndicate Purify Kalkstein. Yeah. Overall, cool card. I don't think it's super backbreaking as a tech card. The cost is pretty high, and yeah, mostly just a support card for stuff that isn't too good. I will give this a 4 out of 5 in playability and a 5 out of 5 for fun. Next up, we have the first, I think, really strong card that we have seen in this review so far, which is Ethereal. With Arrakis Queen, the Arrakis Swarm deck isn't currently that bad. The deck has a lot of little things going on with it, like it's very good at playing around tall removal, because nothing in the deck goes tall. When the ladder's not playing, like Triss Lacerates and multiple forms of Rope Punish, it becomes very hard to interact with, because all of your units are small, and things like Alzur's Thunder even can't find full value targets a lot of the time. And Ethereal just kind of takes that plan and ramps it up even further. So, +3 a turn on drones. You can combo this with Corinthier. You can go, so like in round 1, Corinthier your Ethereal, use an Arrakis charge, Ethereal multiplies. Your board on turn 1 is Corinthier, Ethereal. Your opponent can't use damage to answer Ethereals unless they're answering both of them at the same time, because both of them have this end of turn ability that keeps them multiplying. So the only ways to really answer this are locks, and you can use a consume to consume away the rightmost locked Ethereal in order to keep the one to its left continuing to multiply. Or you can do something like mid-round Lambert after all of the Ethereals have been converted. But to do that, now your Lambert's not answering all their drones for Bone Talisman. Same thing if you're trying to do like a Lacerate type of play. Like, you're not taking away from their going wide plan in order to take away the points from this 3-point per turn engine that is just super hard to answer. Like, the only things really keeping Saul in check and like Dire Mutated Hound in check and the Beast in check are how easy they are to answer. You can just use like any form of tar removal, you can poison them down, you can like combine 2 removal cards and answer them. Ethereal's really hard to efficiently trade with. Like, even Lambert doesn't trade super well after it's multiplied all around. I think this card is incredible and might single-handedly make Arrakis Swarm a deck. Additionally, you can play it with Gurnikora. You can transform the fruit every turn, though notably you have to be a little worried about your opponent using movement on your tall units. So if you try to like Ethereal with fruits, play all your fruits in the melee row, have Ethereals chain off the fruits, and then you play something tall, your opponent can move that tall unit in the row opposite to Ethereal into the Ethereal row, and it'll go to the rightmost zone on the row. So it'll then transform your tall unit into a 4-point Ethereal, which might not be what you were looking to do. Yeah, I think the main use for this card is going to be Arrakis Queen, and I think it's kind of insane there. We will see. Next up, we have All God, who is a 10 for 10 with 6 of it being carryover if you can draw the cards that he targets. Now, he's awful in round 3. If you draw him in round 3, he's probably playing for between 4, 6, maybe 8 points if you have 2 tutors. Maybe some meme deck that thins to 0 might want this, but I feel like if you're unable to play the cards that you buff in round 3, that he's just like so far from being good. I'm not sure what you even want to do with him. A lot of the talk that I've seen in my Twitch chat around him has been like buffing some engines that you want to try to draw later, or like buffing your Damien, your Skellen, and like a Roach or something, so you're getting some tempo out of it. But it just looks so bad for 10 provisions to do all that. And like, you still have to find your Damien and Skellen. It's not even like Albrecht, which guarantees that you find the cards later. Yeah, I don't see it. As far as playability goes, I sort of want to give this a 1 out of 5. And while when I first saw this card, I thought it'd be fun, I really just have no idea what I'd want to do with it. The only thing going for it is it like does something sort of unique, but the unique thing that it does just seems kind of bad. Yeah. Anyway, though, going from one card that I think is supposed to be a fun card to an actually fun card, we have Master Mirror. Veil Deploy. 6 for 10, transform the leftmost card in your hand to a random legendary from your faction that was not in your starting deck. Repeat this ability whenever you play the rightmost card from your hand. So the main pattern that you're going to want to do with this card is you're going to want to play a Master Mirror. You're going to transform a bronze in your hand and hopefully something that is slightly to much better than that initial bronze card was. Then you play that bronze card, and then you play the leftmost card in your hand, transform another bronze card that's to the left of your hand. And then you keep doing this, you juggle back and forth. You play the leftmost card, you play the rightmost card, you play the leftmost card, you play the rightmost card. Sometimes you have to play 2 cards to the right in order to transform like a bad legendary that you rolled into something a little bit better. But yeah, so the card has pretty big sequencing requirements on it. And it does play... It probably plays as like an 8 for 10-ish tempo. Sort of, because like the initial card that you're transforming should hopefully be an upgrade. You would think. But yeah, unfortunately, if you look at the legendary pool, there's sort of a lot of junk in it. And a lot of the good stuff in the legendary pool are cards that you want to put in your deck. So it's going to sort of be weighted away from the good cards just by the nature of you can actually just play the good cards and not have to roll them off Master Mirror. That said, you can do some very silly things like play multiple scenarios in a round if you get incredibly lucky. And I know some people will certainly be trying to get incredibly lucky. Hint, hint. If factions weren't getting so many good top-end options in this set, I could maybe see this being played in some of the more mid-rangey decks, but I think right now, from what we've seen of the set so far, there's enough good top end that it's going to be hard to justify a card like Master Mirror in any competitive deck. Yeah. So playability, I would give this like a 2 out of 5, but it is definitely a 5 out of 5 on the fun scale. Lastly, we have a Neuromancy. Echo, play any card from your deck. So we touched on the Echo mechanic a little bit earlier when we talked about Squirrel. What it does is when you play a card with Echo, at the start of the next round, give it Doomed, and put it on top of your deck. Yeah, so you play your Echo card, the round ends, it goes to the top of your deck, you draw that card, so in round 2 you will draw it, if you played in round 1 you will draw it in round 2. So, and then it gets Doomed, so you don't get to play it a third time. But basically what this lets you do, is for decks like Triple Getty or decks that want to find like Crow Mother, or for decks like Svalbard Priest that really want to find specific cards in round 1. This lets you find those cards while not committing like a full 10 provision Royal Decree into finding those cards in the first round. So you're not going to be in that situation where you have to Royal Decree for Priest in round 1 and then later on miss your Wildcarl because you had to waste your Royal Decree to find your bronze. Notably, the provision costs on Echo cards are a little bit misleading because you're sort of getting 2 cards for the price of 1. So while you're paying 12 provisions for your Neuromancy, you get to play like a 12 provision card now, and you get to play another 12 provision card later. So you're sort of splitting the cost between 2 cards. If you want to look at it that way, you can sort of see a Neuromancy as like a 8-ish provision card, where you take 4 away, because that's the base cost. The cards can't cost less than that. Divide that by 2, and then add that to the base. So each Neuromancy sort of costs 8, as long as you find it before round 3. It's relevant when you play it. The not drawing an extra card from your deck is relevant because the extra card doesn't go to your hand, it goes to the top of your deck, so you see 1 fewer card in your deck. It's like you're playing a 26 card deck at that point. It's a little more complicated than saying it like it costs 8 provisions, but roughly, assuming all things are going to plan, a Neuromancy sort of almost costs 8 provisions. Yeah, play any card from your deck versus Royal Decree, which is play any unit from your deck. This lets you tutor scenarios like Mata does. With Gourd, it gives you a way to chain specials that isn't like Call of the Forest into Falve into another special. Does a couple things that Royal Decree can't, but overall I think you're going to be playing this because you value the Echo effect, you want to find specific cards in round 1, and while also not missing your important goals like Champion of Svalbard in round 3. Anyway, we've gone almost 20 minutes. So much for 10 minutes. Anyway, that is going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, maybe subscribe, check out some other videos on this channel. Leave a comment if you disagree with any of the things that I said, if you think All God is the best card in the set, and you want to defend that, feel free. If you think Ethereal is a piece of trash, also feel free. But yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. I will see you next time.